For decades, Sam Elliott moved through Hollywood with the calm authority of a man who never had to explain himself. He let his work do the talking, his presence say the rest. But behind that steady image, there was a quiet ache. A disappointment that never faded. Not caused by critics, not by box office numbers, but by one man whose actions felt like a direct insult to everything Sam believed the American West stood for. As time passed, that disappointment didn't soften, it hardened, it turned sharp. And when Sam finally allowed himself to speak about it, Hollywood realized there was exactly one person he could never truly forgive. Sam Elliott had always lived by one unbreakable rule: a cowboy never turns himself into a spectacle. To Sam, Western masculinity was built on restraint, silence, and action over noise. You didn't perform toughness, you embodied it. That belief is why the night Clint Eastwood stepped onto the stage at the Republican National Convention in Tampa in 2012 changed everything. Sam was watching the broadcast from Texas, surrounded by people who still saw Eastwood as a sacred symbol of the genre. Then Clint dragged an empty chair onto the stage and began talking to it as if President Obama were sitting there. Sam froze. No laughter, no reaction, just silence. The room around him followed his lead. To Sam, this wasn't just a political moment, it was a line being crossed. It felt like a violation of an unwritten code Sam had lived by his entire life. The code that said a cowboy never uses his image to play politics, never turns the West into a prop, and never turns grit into theater. When memes flooded the internet with the hashtag Eastwooding, the mockery itself didn't sting Sam. The choice did. Clint had willingly turned himself into a political performer instead of protecting the myth they were supposed to guard. What cut even deeper was what came next. When Clint was asked about it by the Carmel Pine Cone, he brushed it off and said people are too sensitive. That single moment sealed it. Sam later told a close friend that Eastwood had started to resemble Harry Callahan more than the grounded man he once admired. A figure driven by ego, armored by certainty, and untouched by accountability. The cowboy hero Sam respected had transformed into someone who believed he could never be wrong. From that point on, Clint Eastwood became the face of a betrayal Sam Elliott would never forget. But Clint wasn't the only name tied to Sam's disillusionment. If Eastwood was a loud public break, then Robert Redford was something quieter, deeper, and far more personal. Early in his career, Sam admired Redford like so many young actors did. Redford was Hollywood royalty, thoughtful, well-spoken, passionate about the environment, and the creator of Sundance, a place meant to lift new voices. On the surface, Redford looked like everything Sam respected. But as the years rolled on, cracks started to show. Sam began noticing a growing gap between the Redford everyone celebrated and the man behind the polished image. By the 2000s, Sundance had changed. What was once a rebellious home for independent filmmakers had become a luxury marketplace. Corporate sponsors everywhere, celebrity-driven buzz, studio-backed films dominating the space. And to Sam, that shift said more than any interview ever could. The very thing Robert Redford built to protect authenticity slowly started to feel, to Sam, like a shrine to the Hollywood machine. What once stood for raw voices and risky ideas now felt hollow. During the filming of The Ranch, Sam quietly remarked to people close to him that walking through Park City during the festival no longer felt like a refuge for artists. It felt like walking through a luxury shopping district, designer brands everywhere, expensive scents in the air, and status on full display. Teslas lined the streets. Influencers posed for cameras in spaces where young filmmakers once begged for a screening slot. To Sam, the contrast was impossible to ignore. But the part that unsettled him most wasn't the festival itself. It was Redford's public image versus his private reality. Redford often appeared on television speaking passionately about environmental responsibility, simple living, and the dangers of excess. Yet reports revealed he owned multiple massive properties, including a private ranch spanning over 700 acres in Santa Fe and a Napa Valley estate worth millions. Critics started labeling him a Hollywood eco-elite. But to Sam, the issue ran deeper than hypocrisy. To Sam, it was about distance. Redford had drifted so far from the values he spoke about that he became a symbol of moral branding. Hollywood adored a man who preached restraint while living in luxury. In 2017, at a post-Oscar event in Beverly Hills, Sam entered a room, spotted Redford speaking animatedly with Jane Fonda, and immediately turned around and walked out without saying a word. A producer watching from across the room later said it didn't look like anger at all. It looked like heartbreak, like watching an old belief quietly collapse. For Sam, Redford was no longer the figure of virtue he once admired. He had become the perfect example of Hollywood's habit of sounding righteous while living far removed from the realities they claimed to defend. If Redford left Sam disappointed and Eastwood left him angry, then Kevin Costner stirred something even more complicated. To Sam, Costner represented a version of the cowboy image that had been polished, packaged, and stripped of its soul. That tension didn't start with Yellowstone in 2018. It went all the way back to 1994 during what critics jokingly called a Western Civil War. Two Wyatt Earp films were released just 6 months apart. Tombstone, gritty and grounded, starred Kurt Russell with Sam Elliott in a key role. Then there was Wyatt Earp, a $60 million studio production led and produced by Kevin Costner himself. Sam never spoke publicly about it, but privately, the message was clear. To him, Costner's version symbolized everything he feared Hollywood was becoming. Too clean, too glossy, too safe. When the New York Times criticized Costner's film for lacking grit and feeling overly polished, Sam laughed in the makeup trailer and told a cinematographer, "That's a Hollywood cowboy. They ride like their jackets cost too much to wrinkle." From that moment on, distance settled in. Nothing dramatic, nothing explosive, just two worlds slowly pulling apart. That gap widened even more when Yellowstone premiered in 2018. Critics crowned Costner the man who revived the Western for a new generation, but Sam saw something else entirely. To him, it was a carefully packaged fantasy of ranch life made for people who had never touched real dirt. They turned the West into a truck commercial, Sam told Vanity Fair. Costner later fired back on Entertainment Tonight with a smirk, saying, "Sam thinks he owns the West. Maybe he should buy America too." The crowd laughed. Sam didn't. What made it worse were the personal controversies surrounding Costner. A high-profile divorce, endless tabloid rumors, and a widely reported 2006 spa accusation that later collapsed, but still left a stain in the headlines. To Sam, it all reinforced one painful truth: the cowboy image had become something Hollywood sold, not something it lived. For Sam Elliott, these fractures weren't about grudges or competition. They were about watching something sacred slowly get reshaped into a product. The cowboy wasn't supposed to be loud, flashy, or market-ready. He was meant to be grounded, flawed, and honest. And as Hollywood pushed further into branding and spectacle, Sam felt more alone standing by the old rules. Behind closed doors, Sam was known for avoiding industry parties where image mattered more than substance. He preferred quiet conversations, early mornings, and sets where people worked instead of postured. Friends noticed he rarely spoke negatively about anyone outright, but when certain names came up, his tone changed. Not angry, just firm, like someone closing a door without slamming it. To Sam, the real damage wasn't done by one moment or one performance. It was the slow erosion of meaning. Westerns were no longer stories about consequence and survival. They were becoming platforms, vehicles, and glossy symbols shaped to fit trends. That shift disturbed him more than any headline ever could. Sam once told a colleague that the West didn't need saving, and it didn't need reinvention. It needed respect. He believed the land, the people, and the stories spoke for themselves if you stayed quiet long enough to listen. That belief shaped every role he chose and every role he turned down. While others chased relevance, Sam leaned into consistency. He wasn't interested in being everywhere. He wanted to be true. And that choice made him stand apart in an industry obsessed with reinvention. Some admired it. Others didn't know what to do with it. When interviews touched on modern Westerns, Sam stayed careful with his words. He didn't attack. He observed. He spoke about authenticity, patience, and earning the dirt on your boots, but anyone paying close attention could hear the disappointment beneath the calm tone. Hollywood had moved on, but Sam hadn't followed. He didn't feel left behind. He felt planted, rooted in a version of storytelling that didn't beg for approval. That refusal to bend made him quietly intimidating in rooms full of people selling ideas. Producers learned quickly that Sam couldn't be convinced with hype. No speeches, no trends. If the story didn't feel real, he walked. If the character felt like a costume, he passed. And that made his presence rare in an industry crowded with noise. To Sam Elliott, the cowboy wasn't a brand. It was a responsibility. And watching others turn it into something shiny and disposable left scars he never felt the need to explain out loud. He didn't call people out. He didn't start fights. He simply stepped away. And in doing so, Sam became something even rarer than a Hollywood star. He became a reminder. A reminder of a time when silence carried weight, when restraint meant strength, and when the West didn't need to be sold to be believed. Each new controversy only hardened Sam Elliott's belief that Kevin Costner didn't represent the heritage of the West, but Hollywood's recklessness with it. By the time reports surfaced in 2023 that Costner clashed with Yellowstone creator Taylor Sheridan over filming schedules, Sam felt nothing but confirmation. To him, that dispute said everything. Cowboys don't argue over hours. They ride until the sun drops and the work is done. It was never rivalry, never jealousy. It was conviction. In Sam's eyes, Costner had taken the West and turned it into a brand, a logo, a product. And that, to Sam Elliott, crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. If Costner stood for Hollywood's polished cowboy fantasy, then Benedict Cumberbatch represented something Sam found even more disturbing, a total misunderstanding of what the West truly was. When The Power of the Dog swept through award season in early 2022, critics praised it as daring, psychological, and bold. Hollywood treated it like a revelation. But when Sam watched it quietly in a small Santa Barbara theater, he felt none of that excitement. Instead, he felt a slow, aching disappointment. To him, it felt like watching the West rewritten by people who admired it from a distance, but never lived its rhythm. That ache finally slipped out in February 2022 during an appearance on the WTF with Mark Maron podcast. With a tired laugh, Sam criticized the film's naked cowboys, the British accents, and what he described as a version of Montana shaped by people who had never truly been there. It was the first time in decades Sam publicly broke his personal code of silence, and Hollywood reacted instantly. Variety described his comments as a gunfight from another era. Within hours, Sam Elliott was trending online, with younger audiences calling him outdated and closed off. But to Sam, none of it was personal. It wasn't about Benedict Cumberbatch at all. It was about authenticity, something he felt the film ignored completely. What most people didn't know was that the tension started years earlier. In 2019, Sam had already declined a cameo invitation from director Jane Campion. He turned it down with one blunt sentence: "I won't tell the West through someone who doesn't understand it." That decision left a quiet but deep mark on everything he later said. When The Power of the Dog dominated the Oscars, Benedict addressed the controversy calmly, telling reporters, "Art doesn't belong to one man." It was polite, measured. But to Sam, it cut deeper than any insult ever could. The moment that sealed it came at the 2022 post-Oscar party. Sam and Benedict crossed paths, shook hands, and didn't exchange a single word. A server nearby later described the silence as heavy enough to bend the air. No hostility, no drama, just two worlds standing inches apart and never touching. To Sam, Benedict Cumberbatch wasn't a villain. He was a symbol of a new Hollywood that dissected the West, psychoanalyzed it, and reinterpreted it until the raw simplicity was gone. The dust, the restraint, the silence, all replaced by commentary and performance. Sam had spent his entire life protecting that simplicity, and yet, even this clash wasn't the one that hurt him most. Before Taylor Sheridan entered the picture, Sam believed the greatest threat to the Western genre came from actors who misunderstood it. But Sheridan represented something far more unsettling. A writer who understood the West well enough to recreate it, and powerful enough to reshape it into something Sam barely recognized anymore. Sam Elliott's story with Taylor Sheridan didn't start in bitterness, it began with real hope. In 2016, when Hell or High Water earned critical praise and 4 Oscar nominations, Sam did something rare. He mailed Sheridan a handwritten letter calling him the last man who still hears the Texas wind. That wasn't casual praise. That was respect, straight from the gut. But everything shifted when Yellowstone arrived. In 2018, Sam tuned in, watched barely 15 minutes, and shut it off. To him, it wasn't a story about the West at all. It felt like a spectacle designed for wealthy audiences. A version of the West with perfect lighting, styled wardrobes, and ranchers who looked like they stepped out of a glossy catalog. Paramount celebrated Sheridan for creating the most expensive Western television universe ever. Sam saw something else entirely. He saw a man turning the West into an empire. Reports later revealed that Sheridan sold Yellowstone to Paramount for around $500 million, while also leasing his own 6666 ranch back to the studio for millions each season. Insiders joked about the double-dipping cowboy. But to Sam, it wasn't funny. To Sam, it was confirmation, proof that the West had been monetized from every angle. What made it personal was 1883. When Sam signed on, the script felt raw, stripped down, and honest. Everything he believed in. But by the time the series aired, revisions requested by the studio had softened the edges, polished the grit, and transformed the story into prestige television instead of a brutal frontier tale. While in Santa Fe, Sam confided to a colleague, they turned blood into perfume. The words carried weight. Sheridan later responded indirectly in a magazine interview saying, Sam forgot America has changed. That single line hit harder than any open insult. To Sam, it suggested he no longer belonged in a world he helped shape. Their final silent standoff came at the 2022 Critics' Choice Awards. Both men were in the room. Both avoided eye contact. A photographer later described it as two men staring at completely different versions of the same country. For Sam, Sheridan wasn't just a writer or a creator. He was proof that even heritage could be packaged, branded, and sold to the highest bidder. That cut deeper than any disagreement with an actor ever could. But among all the names tied to Sam Elliott's resentment, one stood apart. Not fiery like his remarks about Benedict Cumberbatch, not quietly disappointing like Robert Redford, not a sense of betrayal like Clint Eastwood, and not conflicted like Kevin Costner. The bitterness he felt toward Maron carried something colder, the feeling of being used. To Sam, Maron wasn't a rival or a confused artist. He was someone who turned a private moment into public spectacle, and did it with a grin. When Sam agreed to appear on the WTF with Maron podcast in February 2022, he expected a thoughtful conversation about craft, longevity, and storytelling. Instead, his frustration about the power of the dog spilled out naturally, almost without intention. He spoke honestly, maybe too honestly, and before the episode had even finished uploading, it spread like wildfire. Millions of listens poured in within days. Headlines exploded, social media fractured into sides. Instead of cooling things down, Maron leaned into the chaos. 2 weeks later, on another episode of WTF, he joked that the old man should retire and that Hollywood didn't need another angry cowboy. The laugh landed hard. To Sam, that wasn't humor. It was betrayal wrapped in a punchline. After that moment, Sam Elliott pulled back even further from the noise. Not out of fear, not out of regret, but out of principle. He believed some lines, once crossed, didn't deserve a response. To him, turning private frustration into public entertainment was another sign that Hollywood had lost its sense of restraint. Sam didn't fire back on social media. He didn't schedule interviews to defend himself. He went quiet. And in Sam's world, silence wasn't weakness. It was judgment. Friends noticed he became more selective, more guarded, choosing his words like a man who knew exactly how easily meaning could be twisted. Behind the scenes, Sam told a longtime collaborator that the industry no longer listened, it reacted. Nuance was gone. Everything had to be sharp, viral, and loud. And that environment felt hostile to the kind of storytelling he believed in. Stories built on patience, not provocation. Producers who approached Sam after the controversy noticed a shift. He asked fewer questions about budgets and more about intent. Why this story? Why now? Who is it really for? If the answers felt rehearsed or market-driven, he passed without hesitation. To Sam, the West wasn't a trend cycle. It wasn't something you refreshed every few years to keep audiences engaged. It was lived experience, passed down through tone, posture, and silence. That belief made him increasingly incompatible with an industry chasing instant reactions. Even younger actors who admired Sam noticed the distance. Some said he felt like a relic. Others said he felt like an anchor, someone who refused to drift just because the current changed. Sam didn't correct them. He didn't need to. What frustrated him most wasn't criticism. It was being misunderstood on purpose. Sam believed disagreement was healthy, but distortion wasn't. And watching serious conversations reduced to sound bites left him colder than any bad review ever could. In private moments, Sam admitted that Hollywood no longer scared him. It disappointed him. The applause felt thinner. The praise felt strategic. And the outrage felt staged. None of it carried the weight he respected. He once remarked to a friend that the cowboy was never meant to be explained. You either felt it or you didn't. And the more Hollywood tried to explain it, analyze it, and reshape it, the further it drifted from its roots. Offers still came in, big ones. But Sam walked away from more projects than he accepted. If the character felt performative, or the script treated the West like a backdrop instead of a living force, He declined without drama. To Sam Elliott, integrity wasn't loud, it didn't announce itself. It showed up in what you refused to do. And after everything he'd seen, he was more comfortable refusing than ever before. The industry kept moving, louder, faster, brighter. Sam stayed exactly where he was, grounded, still, unmoved by trends that burned hot and faded fast. And in that stillness, Sam didn't see himself as left behind. He saw himself standing guard over something that didn't need updating, approval, or applause. The clip spread fast, almost instantly. Younger audiences laughed it off. Older fans felt disrespected, but Sam Elliott didn't laugh, and he definitely didn't forget. To him, something sacred had been crossed. An unwritten rule shattered. You don't turn a guest's vulnerability into content. Sam later told a close friend back in Texas, "I spoke from the heart, he spoke for attention." That line said everything. To Sam, the issue wasn't disagreement, it was intent. 3 months later, the sting deepened. Mark Maron appeared on Real Time with Bill Maher and doubled down. He labeled Sam a man afraid of change, and the audience roared with laughter. Sam watched from home in silence. No anger, no outburst. In one rare, private moment, Sam quietly said, "Some people talk every day so they can feel real. I never had that problem." It wasn't said with bitterness, it was said with clarity. For the first time, Sam didn't feel misunderstood. He felt used. Maron's career surged from the same storm that left Sam drained and bruised. And while Sam never fired back publicly, those closest to him noticed something different. His silence wasn't restraint, it was pain. Among all the men tied to Sam Elliott's resentment, Mark Maron stood apart. Not the most famous, not the most powerful, not the most influential, but he was the only one who took Sam's honesty and turned it into entertainment. That mattered more than politics, more than artistic disagreement, more than ideology. Because to Sam, trust once broken never really comes back. And that wound cut deeper than any public argument ever could. Sam Elliott's story isn't just about clashes with powerful figures. It's about watching the world he devoted his life to slowly change into something he barely recognized. Whether it was Hollywood politics, commercialized westerns, or voices that profited from his honesty, each moment left a mark far deeper than anyone realized. And somewhere in that long list of names, one man left a scar that never fully healed. Now it's your turn. Which of these 8 men do you think hurt Sam Elliott the most, and why? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if you felt something real, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.